basically there's the meme of Jake Norwood when he was on ESPN, and the lady says playing with swords is dangerous. It's serious business. He goes, right, you should never play with swords. So what got you into this, wanting to play with swords?
And then his adorable little smile.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know, Beth, if you want to talk a little bit about if you've run into that in the HEMA space, the study versus sport, and if you have thoughts on that.
Yeah, like obviously that's like a huge point of contention that's like I find very irritating. Yeah, I mean, so like I've been doing bowhurt for the last, I guess, for like 2 years, because this last year is like whatever. But you know, I've also been doing HEMA for about 6 years now, and I run the Sword Squatch, the HEMA event in Seattle that we're going to be doing our 6th year this year. Like we've done it digitally. We did it digitally this last year, and we'll be doing that again this year. And not only, you know, is it a thing that, like, this is a thing that I find that it is really important to me in terms of this question, and that like we bring to Sword Squatch a lot. And I think that for me, the thing is that all of it is very important. And it is very important that you play and that you just, you know, fuck around with swords. And it's also very important that relatively important that you do like the studying and things. And like you can do these in any measure or in any like level and in, you know, intensity, and how much, you know, that balance is like what you should be what you enjoy. But I think the thing that's really important across the board with all of it is like a degree of intellectual honesty about it. And that like, if all you're doing is studying forms out of the book, there, like, that is valuable. And if that's what makes you happy, then that's what you should do. But like, if you think that just studying out of the book is going to like translate to like you're going to be good on the street in a moment's notice, like that's just not true. And you know, and conversely, if like, you know, there's like a ton you can learn from only ever sparring, and that's the only thing you do, but there's nuance and skill and like things that you haven't thought of that you will get out of books, and you will get out of drills, and like just only sparring doesn't make you automatically a better fighter than someone who does a mix of it. But like that, what's really important, I think that the balance of all of them really matters, because there's things that you learn in the book that become, that if you're only doing it like as solo practice or only doing it with very cooperative partners, becomes very different when you're doing it with like at speed and with resistance and with the, you know, infinite variabilities that come from an actual sword fight. And being able to have environments where you can test that and test it under pressure is really important, because then it like shows what, you know, what works and what doesn't. And then there's like this huge thing that for me with HEMA in particular, because it does tend to come from an academic background and people that aren't maybe super athletic or have been wrestling as much as the people of the time knew how to wrestle, because that's what they did since before they could walk. There are things that like, you know, all of those, you know, Fiore is starting from like, you know how to wrestle, so I'm not even going to bother talking about that. Like, he literally says it at the beginning of the book. And so there's like this baseline physicality that is there that isn't written about, because it's just like, you know, you don't teach someone the alphabet at the beginning of a novel because you just expect that they know how to read. And so like, that's like this piece that's there. And so if you don't understand some of those basic physical things that come from wrestling, and then you try to go and apply the stuff straight from the book, you're going to be missing a bunch of, you know, like physical vocabulary because of that stuff. So like, that's why like all of these pieces are really important. And
I think there's also like, for me, there's that, right? The sport gives you the it's as close as you're going to get to having that like fear of death, unless you decide to have a duel, which I don't think you can do anywhere. Right, like even the few people who have sparred with sharps, right, it's very small. They do it either to like, there's the crazy people in Germany who did to first cut, but that's it. And they're not actually fighting, they're just fighting, they're doing mensure, right, they're fighting to cut each other to prove how badass they are, which is still pretty badass. Or you have like Roland, where he's, I think it's Roland, the I-33 guy who goes super slow and does it with sharps, but he's like, I'm very careful because I don't want to cut and kill my opponent, right? And like, so the closest you're gonna get to having that fear of death is a fear of failure, right? Sports as close as we can get to that, and that's still not 100% accurate, but so I think there, like you said, like that pressure testing, doing it under pressure is important, but also throughout history, right? If we look back, there's always been sword sport. Maybe not always, but like the Romans had the gladiatorial arena, right? That was sword sport. In the Middle Ages, we had tourneys, and yes, tourneys were practiced for war. But also, you have like William Marshall, who basically didn't go to war and just won all of his fucking wealth through tourney. In fencing, right, as a dueling art was through like the 15th century through like the 19th century. But in the 18th century, it became a sport, right? Someone was like, I'm going to teach people to do this for fun. And we had people always watching duels before then, right? In a lot of the paintings of duels, you'll see there's people in the background. So the idea of sport as sword sport as entertainment, I think, is a huge thing. And then also just as like, if we want to preserve it, right? This is called the art of the sword. If we want to preserve that art, it needs to be a live art. We can't just study it as a dead thing and see this is what people used to do. It's a thing that you have to say, I want this to grow and continue. And like, there's no need to use swords in war anymore. And you don't use a sword for defense. So like the only place to make it living, in my opinion, is in the crafting of it, which many people have done, right? And like most of the crafters aren't using medieval techniques and no one gets mad at them for it. They're doing whatever they can to make cool ass swords. And like, it's really cool when someone does it perfectly, either to look like a perfect replica or using those techniques. But it's also really cool when that guy makes the Buster sword from Final Fantasy VII, right? They're all cool. And that's one of the things is that it's in the Bohart world, we even don't really do it. We don't try to push to new things, right? We're reenacting, not reenacting, but we're recreating a very specific tournament, and we kind of fucked with the rules of. But like that's what I am trying to push for, and where I really want to see is that we don't lose this idea of it, and we don't just say this is the secondary thing, right? Like Botten is a medieval festival, and I know very few HEMA people who talk about wanting to do the tourney and not feeling a pressure to like, I'm less because I just want a tourney fight. And like, why, right? Like Swordfish is dope. A bunch of people want to watch people fight with swords. That's valuable in and of itself. It's super valuable if we can pull from it, if we can test the theories, but it's also super valuable because like swords are cool and we want to watch people fight with swords. And I don't see people pushing for that. I don't see people trying to do new things, right? The new is often shunned in our world because a lot of us are historical minded. And like I'm not, and this is another thing that I love about it. I came from this with a very bro background. I found the SCA because I wanted to hit people with sticks. I never cared about history. I didn't care about knights. I liked swords. And that was the closest I could get to using swords. And then now I can start naming off certain famous knights. I know battles that happened. I care about armor fitting and period shoes and shit. Like you learn a love of history. What? What's that?
I guess your armor does fit.
Yeah, I mean, my armor, my armor is not period at all, because I'm a lazy ass bitch. But I love when other people put together beautiful kits, and like seeing them do it right. And like you find that love by doing the sword, by practicing the sword. You learn to love everything that comes with it. And I mostly want to sort of make, like, I don't have any real substance of to prove anything here. I just want to make an emotional plea that, like, let's make swords cool again. Let's use swords in new ways. Let's embrace every aspect of it that we can, and not try to be um, the tribal people that we often are, right? Like we're talking about swords, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's some people in here who don't like the SCA because it's not historical enough, or they don't use swords. They use sticks. They use wasters. That was a big thing I found in HEMA. The people I talked to, they hated the SCA. Like, and like I know so many people from Bohurt who hate HEMA because it's just a bunch of academic book nerds. And like, no, most of them are badass fighters when they actually want to be badass fighters. So like, I don't know. That's the thing that I just don't see. And like, I don't see people really pushing for, except for Bohurt a little bit, right? Botan has, so Swordfish is my understanding is the biggest HEMA event. Next would be in America, the biggest is Long Point, right? Is there another big one? Do you know?
Long Point, well, Long Point's gone through some changes, but is pretty big. And then Purple Heart Open in Texas is another really big one.
Yeah.
And then
I didn't. Yeah, go on. No.
I was gonna say, I mean, like, and then like I'm gonna like plug my own event, which is like Sword Squatch. And I think that's like actually a thing that we actually are really trying to do is push a lot of is push boundaries and try new things. And the thing that we actually really value and have been, you know, like we've been playing with our own rule sets. We've been, you know, trying to expand the array of instructors and sort of things that we're teaching. It was kind of cool when I was looking at the schedule for this event, and you guys got Damon, and we get Damon too because he's awesome. But I mean, the other thing that like I wanted to bring up that I mean it is a thing that like literally one of our mottos for Sword Squatch is play, fight, learn, and that those things are really important in equal measure. And then my partner Andrew says this thing quite often about like if you look at apex predators and look at how like wolves and lion cubs and big animals and how do they learn how to like be the most murder machines is that they play with each other, and like they learn how to kill things by fighting and not murdering their siblings, and then those skills then get turned into, you know, and you know, some instinct and very powerful jaws help with that, but like but they still learn that through playing, and that's a thing that we you know, if you make studying swords only very serious academic work or only very serious like training, you're missing a huge piece of it, which is that when you're playing, that's when you can experiment like freely and without pressure, and you know, and become a better fighter.
Yeah.
We got a couple of questions that popped up in here. Yeah. One of them being, does the rivalry between HEMA and SCA come from both sides wanting the other side to come over and join them? Do you think that's what it is, or just do you think it's a
No.
No.
Well, no, it's tribalism, and our shit is better than your shit, and you suck because of it. Like, don't come and play with us. We don't want you because your stuff is weird, and you're gonna bring your weird rowdiness or your weird nerdiness into our stuff, and we don't want that, and you just suck. I mean, that's.
Yeah. There's a web comic I saw where it takes place like there's like a divided medieval village, and you have like the king and his the king and the prince looking down onto the village, and it says underneath, I think it says HEMA, and it's like, or maybe it's reenactment or something, or living history. It says living history, and then they say It's like, Father, what's that down there? And it's like, oh, that's the Boherts and the Hemus. We don't talk to them. And it goes down, and there's two guys fighting over a fence, a literal gate, about who's better. And then he goes, well, what's that over there? And it looks to a dark forest. He's like, that's the SCA. We don't go there. And it's like,
Yeah.
it is that you're right, that tribalism that, don't, even though within the SCA, and there are people who branch out and do HEMA and branch out and do Bohurt and crossover between the two of that, like between you guys. It's like, but you're right. The overall attitude is, like you said, Beth, this is our stuff. Don't try to make it like your stuff.
Yeah. And I think that's the problem, is no one's trying to, right? Like, I've never met someone who does HEMA who comes to the SCA who goes, I want to make the SCA HEMA. They want to go, hey, here's this thing that probably works in our specific rule set from HEMA, and I'll use that. And the rest of it, we can talk about it around the fire if you want. Like, I'll talk about Fiore all the fucking time. But, like, I'm not going to try to make it HEMA. And similarly, I don't know anyone who goes to Bohurt and says, let's make this a one-hit kill game, right? The whole point of Bohurt is that it's attorney to dominance, to who can put the other on the ground, right? And I mean, the only real experience I have with HEMA people not online was at one local club at the Knights Hall, and we still had it. But like, when I went there, I never tried to bring and went, hey guys, why don't you all, punch each other in the face? Like, I don't think you have to try to change. And like, there is no pressure on that, but people, they are resistant, and we are pushing each other out because of tribalism, because we're all fighting over the same attention.
Same group of nerds.
Yeah. And like, we feel like, instead of working together to make swords cooler and pull in more nerds, we want to like fight over the scraps of the people who decided to get off the couch. And like, why don't we not do that and like support each other and build greater things and make sword fighting so cool that like people want to get off the couch and come train and do it. And like, and this was kind of my point where I was trying to go with mentioning Long Point and Swordfish. There's a couple of Long Point videos with 100K views. There's a couple of Swordfish with 300K views, and then most of them have like 20K, right? There's a video from Scholar Gladiatoria there that only has like 20K, and he can regularly average 40K just by being him. Right? So the interest is there. People want to see it, but we don't want to package it like that. Besides, in my opinion, would be Bohurt, right? Battle of the Nation, and like, there's some shittiness to trying to focus on the dollar, right? There's some bad things. We shouldn't all try for that. But if you're trying to be the biggest show, which I think Long Point and Swordfish, at least Swordfish seems to be, like, I don't see why they're not pushing for that too. And like, I don't see anyone in HEMA pushing for that. And like, I know there are people who would much rather watch a HEMA longsword match than watch anything in Bohurt, because it's not the same technical sword work. It's not the same game. And I don't see people pushing that. But like, Battle of the Nations is pulling 300K views easy on like giant streams that are like barely watchable. And we can do that everywhere. And the SCA could do it too, though it wants to be a participation sport, and I don't think it should, because that's not what it's trying to do. But like, there's this idea that we aren't sharing and we're not pushing each other, or it might be getting better. I don't know. The last time I was actively involved in any online communities, I've been trying to purge Facebook recently. It was very bad. And also like, people don't consider Boffer often to be a sword sport. And like, yeah, it's a fucking noodle, but like, whatever, it's still a waster, right? And like, it moves super fast, but so does a fucking fencing epee or a fencing saber. You can move those at about the same speed you can move a Boffer. So why are we shitting on them when it's still just a touch game? That's what fencing is. It's a touch game.
I mean, I think like Boffers are like a hugely valuable tool. And I mean, I think this is a thing that's like, people have said a lot, like people who've played with like in HEMA, if you use nylon swords, the difference between a nylon sword and a steel sword is about the same gap of distance between a steel waster and a sharp sword. So like, you know, we can throw boffers in there that like, I think boffers are better than nylon swords personally. I think nylon is a nightmare. I mean, like, I think nylon swords are the most dangerous swords you can play with, in my opinion, because people tend to not wear enough gear and then weird, stupid shit happens.
Also, they can break sharp, like, right? Like, I've broken a bunch of nylon training swords on a pal. I don't know if they break in.
Yeah, I mean, you can. Yeah, if they're breaking, they get weird. But it's more that like you're not wearing enough gear, and so like it just like you're gonna get banged up weirdly because. But like you can wear, like not you can if you want to do low gear sparring, which I think is really valuable. Do it with foam squishy swords. But yeah, I mean, like I had another sort of direction I wanted to go. There was kind of somewhat kind of jumping back to the like intermingling of like doing all the things with everyone. Like there was this like 18-month period where I did like I was at a HEMA tournament and then started doing like steel fighting and like went, you know, had HEMA or that qualifying tournaments, Battle of Nations, and going to Penzik and a bunch of SCA battles, like all in about 18 months. And the big thing that I learned from all of that is that you should do all of them.
Yeah.
And that like learning that the more that we can get that cross pollination, like I think, you know, it's gonna create for better things. And there's stuff that like each like skill, like each discipline has to offer, including like video techniques, because that's like the thing that you're kind of getting into with the sharing of it. You know, like online and stuff, is that like there's not a lot of, you know, like there's not as many sorry, my dog is barking and it's causing me stress. Like the resources for getting stuff online is, I think, perhaps one of the biggest hindrances to that ability to share it, because like this is a niche sport and like there aren't necessarily a lot of volunteers or people that want to do that. And like, I mean, I have tons of content that I could put online, but is it anywhere? No, because that's hard and I don't want to do that. I want to play with swords.
Yeah.
And, you know, and that's the thing that like when you start getting that cross pollination and participation across the, you know, across the aisles, like someone in the SCA that like is interested and excited and like maybe getting a little bit involved with Bohurt or HEMA, maybe like they're not ready to jump all the way in, but they can help with filming or they can help with that sort of stuff. And that's a place where like being nicer to people and being nicer to your volunteers can get you a lot farther than we get.
So I think this question that just popped up here, Beth, actually goes in nicely to what you've been saying. It asks, what, if any, responsibility do we have as practitioners to develop across the fence line bridges amongst our groups? Because I know I have personally helped to run a tournament that specifically brings SCA and HEMA fighters together and to make connections across the lines that has improved my fighting fencing in the ways I want. And so,
did I cut you off?
Yeah, I think so. I think what we're trying to say is, you know, what if we're the ones being the practitioners of this, what responsibility do we have to try to make those bridges?
I have two answers to this. As a practitioner, you have no responsibility. As a practitioner, you should do whatever makes you happy. Whether that's studying books and never picking up a sword, whether that's making swords, whether that's watching videos of people like doing weird choreography, whatever makes you happy as a practitioner, do. If you want to be a leader in whatever aspect, whether you're teaching choreography, whether you're making videos talking about like the history of swords, whether you're teaching techniques, whether you are running a club, if you want to be a leader, then you have a lot of responsibility. Then you should find everyone nearby and say, hey, can we work together? Because as a practitioner, all you're trying to do is the thing you enjoy. And great, enjoy that. We should encourage people to play how they want to play, to learn how they want to learn, to study how they want to study, whatever. Like, do the thing that makes you happy in your life. But when you want to step up above that, when you want to like start to take on responsibility, when you and get the benefits that come with that, right? Because like if you run a club, you get a little bit of power, and maybe you are one of the few humans who doesn't like power, but like most of us like it a little bit. Right, like, and you get some fame, and like this is an insular community, so you get a little word fame, and like you get a little cult of personality sometimes, and like that, when you get that, then you owe it to people to not be divisive and not push the sports apart, but to bring them together. Because someone in your community who you're training or teaching, someone who you're supporting, in whatever way, may not fit in the thing that you're trying to do. I've had a bunch of people come to the hall who I was training who did not belong in Bowhurt, but wanted to do swords. And when possible, I would try to push them in the place that they could work. But like when we lost our HEMA group, I didn't have a way of pushing them to HEMA, and didn't think, hey, maybe I should just try some HEMA with this guy who wants to learn sword fighting, not beat the other guy with the iron club.
Yeah,
And
I mean, the thing that I would add in that is like that I think that the what's important is maybe not like necessarily building bridges, but leaving doors open and not pushing people away. I mean, like I think a thing that we learned a lot with Sword Squatch was that to not do things that we don't want to do, as even as leaders, is that making sure that the things that we're doing, the things that we're offering, like are only what we have the capacity for, and the like and the excitement for. And you know, with like, you know, Ringo, as you know, like even this example that you're giving, like I don't know that necessarily you're I would agree that like the answer is not to just beat the shit out of someone with a sword that they're not you know, that they're not really actually up for, you know, and but like if like you if the only answer was like having to do HEMA, if HEMA was the only answer for this person and that's not a thing that you have a drive or a passion for, then the answer actually should be like, hey, dude, you know, this is probably a better fit for you somewhere else, but like can I help you find that? But we don't offer that here. And that not overextending yourselves as clubs, I think actually is important, but being like, okay, this is what we do and this is what we do best. And we'll try to help you find a place inside of this. But in terms of like, you know, someone from the SCA coming in, like, no, you don't get to come and kind of turn this into the SCA over, you know, but we're doing this here. We want what you're, you know, we want your new experience. We want your perspective, but we're not going to like dramatically alter what we're doing to make you more comfortable. But, you know, we will find a way for you to do this thing that's our thing that we're doing here. And we want you to be a part of it, but it has to be sort of in that kind of context. Otherwise you end up overstressing yourselves or doing something you don't actually like or enjoy. And then that's bad actually for everyone.
Yeah, that example may have lacked context in that like I do HEMA when I can. It is my like tertiary sword hobby. The one that if I get a chance I do. And but this was an opportunity for me to go, oh, maybe I should lean into this thing I like more and play with swords more. And like I enjoy the fighting of HEMA more than the study, but the study is also interesting. This is a chance for me to do the thing I like more, but also focus on that other aspect and grow it as a fighter and a swordsman. And if he'd said, I want to make swords, I would have said, that's not me.
Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. Yeah.
But like
Ringo, this is actually this next question that came up goes perfectly into what you're saying. They asked, have you learned anything from a sword sport that isn't your main sport that has helped you in your main one?
Yeah, tons. I mean, I found SCA first, so 90% of my sword work for Bowhurt came from the SCA, and then I keep going back and keep learning new stuff there, because I love it. And so like I have the general Bohurt method is very spam because we prioritize points. You don't have to be as defensive, and my way of fighting is much less like that. That depending is often much less like that. Like because I come from a sport where it's very very much you have to block. It's a one-shot kill game. So yeah, and like the stuff I was doing in HEMA for a while gave me. I never had a long point game in the SCA until I went to HEMA, and I still have a shitty long point game, but like now I have a point game. So yeah, like definitely everywhere you go in sport is going to make you better at other sports, right? Like regardless of sword sport. I think that the more interesting question for me is like, again, I came into this for sport, and like when I go to the SCA, I learn history, and then I can then apply some of that in like, oh hey, here's a way that we can modify Bohurt game to make it a more historical tournament style, or to like play with something that they played with in period, or this is why this armor actually doesn't go together, since they care about that stuff. But and similarly, like I can talk about. I never knew like before I started doing some HEMA stuff, I never really understood much about fight books and fight styles and fight schools. And now I can have conversations with people about kendo or about judo and reference this 1300s 1400s fencing master, and the stuff applies. And that's where I think it's not to your practical knowledge, because like my soccer playing makes me a better sword fighter, a better melee sword fighter, not actually probably better singles, and then I have nice feet. But like that's every sport is going to make you better at sports. That's kind of how that works. There's a little transfer, but the thing that we really gain is the stuff outside of that, whether that be knowledge like that, some sort of discipline, networking, and like those are the things that I love about the sword sport aspect, is that like it is a sport that builds this weird community and builds you in ways that no other sport I've played in does. And like it connects you to history in a way no other sport really can. It's like all other sports are kind of modern inventions, and like, but sword sport again goes back to at least the gladiatorial arenas, and there was probably sword type sports in stuff before that I just don't know about, because again, I'm a jock, I'm not a history guy.
So do either of you think that any form of sword sport, and I'm going to remove fencing from this, because fencing, while it is a sword sport, it's already part of the Olympics, but it says, I think any form of sword sport could or should be an Olympic sport at some point. That's a look.
I don't. I think that the thing about Olympic sports is that it needs, most of the Olympic sports have pretty objective criteria, and that's like in general, you need objective criteria to be able to like have a global, like a sport that you can play at a global level. And even the sports that like obviously in gymnastics and figure skating, some like the subjectiveness of it is like one of the biggest pieces of contention. And obviously there will always be refs and there will always be things, but judging is the biggest point of contention in all of HEMA and Bohurt. And I think that I think that Olympic fencing does a good job of, it basically, no matter your rule set, you will always optimize for a rule set. And that's just like how it works. And I think that all of the goals of Bohurt and of HEMA, like kind of like the way that it would get gamified, to me feels really counterproductive to both sports. And And I don't see that being a thing like benefiting anything. Because it's, it's really like boxing. You can do boxing as a judged sport because it's a really narrow amount of things that you're sort of looking at. Like, did you get punched in the face? Like, and that sort of stuff. And that, like, there's just so much, it just gets weird. I mean, there's it real fast.
Yeah, I don't think so for similar reasons, but also like for me, the Olympics is a bad example because I think the Olympics is the second most corrupt sports institution that exists behind FIFA, and I don't want sports to be part of corrupt institutions that I enjoy. Like corruption doesn't make things better. More eyes is great, but like you don't have to go to that place to get legitimacy anymore. We can make our own legitimacy. The other thing would be I don't think it could in any modern rule set for a lot of the reasons Beth said. And then I don't know that it would be worthwhile to make a rule set that is good. Not necessarily because it gets weird or it isn't worthwhile on its own, but like that's what fencing is. Fencing was not fencing, right? The original fencing may have been like slightly on the line, but not kind of the way we do it now. I don't remember if they had real contact, but like you could run, you could cross your legs a lot. Like the rules have slowly evolved to become as sportified as possible, and like that's the big thing a lot of people in HEMA like point to. They go, this doesn't look like sword fighting, which like that's a weird no true Scotsman argument, but like you can understand where they're coming from, and like we already did it, and I don't think that there's any reason to like hate fencing because of what it is, but we've already done it once. Is it really worthwhile to do it again to a different sword sport, right? Like you could try to do it to longsword, or you could try to do it to a melee sport, but I'm not really sure actively trying to sportify a thing makes it better. I think actively avoiding it makes it worse. Right? Like I think saying we're not going to sportify because sportifying is bad is a way of ruining sword fighting. But I also think saying we're going to try to push as hard as we can to get this weird goal that isn't a sword fighting goal is also bad, right? Like let's
I mean, like what's the goal of becoming an Olympic sport? Like what, like is it that you want to be able to say who's the best in the world? Because I don't know, go jack off in a corner. like let's just like, this is, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of some of these big like arguments about swords to me tends to come down to guys, we are grown adults and we're playing with swords. Get over yourself and just have fun. That's why we're here, is to have fun and be good at fighting. And there's a lot of like sports are like good for humans as like sports are good for a lot of reasons. And so just do that. And if you really like need to measure your dicks that badly, then go do Olympic fencing. I don't know. Like, let's just exactly. Like that doesn't.
And like we can have national tournaments and we can have a bunch of things and they exist and we should grow them because it's good to grow things. But I don't think chasing artificial goals. I think that is the problem. And I think that's what the fear in HEMA is. And I think that's a valid fear. And that's honestly a fear in Bohurt that I constantly bring up, that people. So I was on a TV show.
I was gonna ask you a question about this, but you're going into it on your own. Go for it.
So Night Fight was a History Channel special, and as I'm sure everyone watching this knows, History Channel is
very accurate.
Really history, and barely a channel. And they tore apart the game. And what they made was okay, and what they made was okay TV. But like it wasn't the sport, and it wasn't even a good show. It wasn't good at anything because we rushed to get this thing so that we could be on TV instead of going and saying, hey, we understand the product we have. Here's where it would fit on TV. And that would have made a better show. Or saying, hey, we want to make a TV show and we want to make it about sports. So let's take some time and figure out how to make a sport that fits on TV. And they just said, no, let's kind of just, we'll change this rule set like with one X here, and like it's bad. It's just bad. It's not good fighting. It's not good drama. It's not shot very well. Sorry to the cameraman. You guys just weren't sports guys, so I know that's not your fault.
So,
but yeah, like
they what you're saying is that to try to sensationalize it, they artificially engineered what was going on.
Yeah, and like that's the thing we don't need to do. Like we can have sport for sport's sake and enjoy it, and like just know the thing you're doing and want to do it, and try to grow it, right? Like I think if sword sports want to grow to a big level, do it the way esports did it, right? Like find the people who are doing it, record them doing it, and if people want to watch, they'll watch. And if people, and like we see that, right? Like I said, there's a long point, like the whole the swordfish whole longsword tournament that has 100,000 views, right? That's a shit ton of people who went, I want to sit and watch two dudes fight with swords. Watch a bunch of dudes fight with swords. That's like, so like we can find the audience. They're there, but that doesn't mean we should go and say, like, I'm not going to get my dad who doesn't watch any of this stuff to be like, hey, come watch me fight because swords are cool. He'll be like, swords are dumb. Like, no, guns exist for a reason. And like that's the thing. Guns, like there's a bunch of people who do that, right? Like, but so we don't need to chase the casual audience, and we shouldn't. What we should do though is we should try to get the people who watch Shadowversity to enjoy sword sport. We should try to get the people who play sword sports to enjoy book learning to whatever level they want, right? Like we shouldn't basically be like, if you are studying you're studying to the history of the katana, you need to come and watch Bohurt. That doesn't make sense. And similarly, I shouldn't like grab Bohurt guys and be like, I need you to study like how blades have evolved from Greece to now. But I could be like, hey, here's this cool video Matt Easton put out that you might enjoy about cutting with that thing that you're using. Like, have you ever wondered what it would be like if you cut with it? Watch. And they'd probably be like, oh, wow, that was pretty cool. Like that's what we should be trying to do. And like, I particularly wanted to bring people into the sport because that's the world I live in. But like also in that world, I try to bring them back. But like my main thing here, because it's an academic conference, is come to
so folks, Ringo and I have actually known each other for a number of years now through the SCA. And that is something I will say, while he does try to get people into his world, he's never once like, he knows what my capabilities are, and he has never once been like, oh dude, you got to do this, you got to come do this, he's never tried to pressure me at all into ever trying this. So when he talks about, he's completely honest whenever he's talking about what he tries to do and how he approaches things, and it's really and I know that from experience, and I appreciate about that, Ringo, about that.
I mean, like, to speak to that point too, like the reason I play SCA is because of you, right? Like I stayed in the SCA because of the deed. I think I've told you this a few times. The deed was the thing. That's what made me believe in the SCA. And in case you don't know, Matt runs a deed where we try to do a deed of arms. We try to make ourselves look as fancy as possible. We have a gallery of nobles, and they look on, and we get favors. And we try to do the whole thing. And like, I'm shitty at all of those extra things. Like, I don't have a good kit. I'm not good at talking in front of fancy people. I swear a lot. I'm a dirty fighter who likes fighting dirty. But but watching people do that right is so fucking cool, and being part of it is like just a little part of it is so cool. And like that's the thing that the same way, like if people like, there are a bunch of people who like that aspect who probably also really enjoy like getting to punch someone in the face with a steel gauntlet. It's fun. That doesn't necessarily mean you want to go fight Russians who've been training sambo their whole lives and now have put on armor and are badasses at it. Like, but like that doesn't, there's a place for everyone in each, I think. And I just want to make sure that we don't artificially cross ourselves off from enjoying. We love swords again. Like there's a reason we're in this conference. There's a reason we do the things we do. And
So I don't want to cut you off, but we're running short on time. I want to make sure that some of these questions get answered here, because he warned me he was just going to go on a rant for an hour, guys. So but this is for both. So, is there any real difference between American and European styles of sword sport fighting?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, there's just like, I think the brawling, Americans are a little brawlier because we just are. But there's also differences in terms of like in Bohurt with their sword and shield, they have a tendency to do this A-frame thing that is a great way to destroy your shoulders, but is what they do. And it's very optimized. It's very sport optimized for some of those, for the way that that like wins Bohurt duels. I think that might be sort of, I think one of the biggest things with European, like it's true in HEMA as well as in Bohurt, like it's a thing that we end up talking about like a lot, is like, why are the Europeans so much better than us? And that part of it is like the history of it. I mean, just like they have a more continuous sword tradition, and ours can only be 200 years old. But the other thing is that like they have more time to train, and they have more because of European jobs, and that they have more vacation time, and they have better healthcare, and they can do this stuff. And then they don't have the same collegiate sports system that we do. So all the people that could be playing Bohurt, like a huge chunk of them go and play football in college, and they're doing football. The same with, same way for HEMA sports that like might not take the football players, but those players are getting sucked into basketball and soccer and these other sports at an early age. Whereas in Europe, there's a little less of that, like straight to sport, pipeline. And so there's a little bit more diversification. And then like, they're all closer together. And there's like, like here we like, this is a huge problem, is that like, like in Seattle, like we have, people like I can fight. There's like one club in Seattle, there's a club in Tacoma, and there's a club 3 hours south in Portland, and there's another club 3 hours north in Vancouver. But that's kind of it. Like, that's like the easy access that I have is like these small groups of people. And so like, we don't have this huge diversity of people that we can fight. Whereas in Europe, you can, go to 6 different countries in the same amount of time it takes me to get to, Portland. And like, so you're getting this huge, a much like wider pool of people that you can fight and play with, and a much like easier means to do that every month.
And another question is, are there, in non-pandemic times, of course, are there any annual competitions between European and American sword fighters?
Yeah. There's, I mean, so I don't know for HEMA specifically, but like I know Americans have gone to Swordfish, and I know that Europeans have come to Long Point, and I'm sure they've come to other ones too. Like,
yeah, I mean, like we'll go to each other's tournaments, but there's not like a,
Bohurt. There is Bohurt. We have Battle of the Nations, which is which is essentially like Bohurt Olympics, and then we have the IMCF, which is again Bohurt Olympics too.
Yeah, I mean, Swordfish has kind of become HEMA Olympics, but there's nothing that's specifically like Europe versus America.
Do Europeans come to Swords Watch?
We have had a couple. I mean, we've had instructors. I don't think we've had anyone come to do the tournament. We have gotten people from all over the country come for the tournament. But mostly we've just had instructors come from Europe.
Well,
And one from Australia.
I've been taking questions in the chat, but if anybody wants to either raise your hand or unmute yourself and ask a question, feel free to do that now. Last couple of minutes.
It's not.
Sometimes it takes a minute.
Well, I wanted to say that it's great how you point out that doing drills and practices and basically cross training is helpful with your sport of choice, be it cohort or hemo or whatever you're doing, because sparring is important and it's something you have to do, but a lot of times looking at something and doing drills based on something somebody came up with when they were actually fighting for their lives, like Fiore and things like that, you discover something new that you might not have come across and realized you came across in sparring. So, you know, you pull from all the sources that you can. And I think that's terrific that there's such a lively sword culture growing now in the US. And thank you for being part of it. That's great.
Yeah, like drills, I mean, like any drills are the lifeblood of any sport, right? Like football training is all drills, soccer training is all drills, basketball is all drills. And there was a problem in some sword sports. SCA is a very bad example of this, where it was just sparring. And Bohart is getting away from that, but there's still a bunch of people who don't drill, and that's bad. Similarly, studying texts. So the problem I have with studying text personally is that like a lot of the pictures are not, you know, atomically perfect, and they're not giving you the in-betweens. And so I study tape constantly. I watch myself fight, I watch other people fight, I slow it down, but the nice thing about studying text is not only do you get to see that happen, but now you have to figure it out in your head, which means two people could have different interpretations, which means, and like one is probably right, but that doesn't mean the other's necessarily wrong. Like they might both work, which is dope.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing about text that's like that, you kind of like the Fiore comment is a huge one. Like, you know, like I always like to say the thing with Fiore is like it's best read if done, you know, if you think of it as like someone from The Sopranos talking shit at a bar, because like, and I mean, like you like see all these arms, these are the arms I ripped off dudes. Like, isn't that fucking rad? I'm the dopest sword. Like that's literally the fucking book. And
I think those books were designed as enticements for you to sign up and study with the guy who wrote the book.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they're advertising for their sword teaching, and they're made for their patron. And so like there's even that it's like, you know, like obviously like I love Fiore. Fiore is my guy. But there's still like this, like when you're reading these books, if you're taking them as like this like holy scripture of sword, you're like, don't, because that's not like, it's like hugely open for interpretation. There's all these pieces that are missing, even in like the explanation. Like, I mean, I could write, if I describe a drill to someone, like it's going to get in, you know, and I write it down with pictures and I'm okay at drawing, like there's 6 people will interpret it 6 different ways. And so like, that's completely different from the way that I intended it. So, but all of those ways are probably pretty valid. So it's like with all of this, it's like being there. I don't think there's closer ways that are more accurate. But like, that's why there's so much debate about interpretations, is because like, you know, we're playing 400-year-old telephone.
Exactly.
Well, I think this is a great place to stop for the day. Good lead in, because tomorrow we're going to start back at 10 o'clock with the rogue fencing, doing an intro to Hema longsword. So we can see some of the drills here. I want to thank Ringo and Beth for joining us this afternoon. You guys been a great conversation about this, getting us great insight into, you know, your realm of this thing, and you didn't just rant for an hour, Ringo. It's fine. So, but again, this session was sponsored by the Knights Hall, Nashua, New Hampshire, premier sword sport training facility here on the East Coast, and thank you again to Evan and Beth, and we'll see everybody tomorrow at 10 a.m.
Bye.
Bye.